So, Mr. Treasurer, I think we can get started. We have a quorum. So please call the roll when you have your glasses on.
I have my glasses on, yes. Okay, we're all set. Chairman Hudson,
Here?
Ms. Gibbs, Mr. Peretti,
Here.
Ms. Zaranin, Mr. Hemphill, Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Robinson.
Here.
You have a quorum?
Okay, very good. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's having a nice summer. A little time off in July, so appreciate it. Back in action. So our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from our June 11th meeting, which seems so far away. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Our next order of business will be the June monthly financial report. And I'll just comment on the balance of the agenda. We really have, this should be a shorter meeting today because especially after dealing with the budget issues, this is really just mop up from the close of the fiscal year in June. And so we'll probably have two that are a little longer in our next two meetings. But so Stan, if you can start us out, Mr. Treasurer, with our June financials and then move on to the update.
Absolutely. You have in your packets, and I believe I also emailed to you, not only the monthly financial report, the green bar, as well as my comments and the management discussion and analysis. And you also have a printout of the PowerPoint presentation that I will go through rather quickly this evening, but it is the one that will, unless it's modified here, will be also presented to the Board of Education at the August 18th board meeting, which is next week. And as Board Member Hudson mentioned, this is the report on June 15, the final month in the fiscal year, and from that I'll roll right into an update on the five-year forecast as a result of a couple of events that have occurred since last we met. If I go to slide 4 to begin the presentation, would note to you that the year-to-date revenues ended up very much on target at plus 0.2% above our estimates, and our expenditures were slightly under target at minus 0.9% respectively. How we got there with the pieces and parts and how the variances worked out we'll discuss, because not everything was quite as smooth as the 0.2 and the 0.9 indicate, and so we'll cover some of that. As a matter of comparison here, give you a breakdown in terms of where our revenue sources finished the year: 50% in local property taxes, 44% in state sources, which includes our state foundation aid, as well as the property tax reimbursements that we receive through rollback and homestead exemption. Our other operating revenues at about 3%, and non-operating revenues at another 3%. Pretty typical and as expected. We begin by looking in slide 7, the variances for revenue items. The first one being general property tax, and this was, as my notes I have here, spot on, and no real explanation is necessary. Our model for forecasting that is pretty good on the basis of assessed valuation changes, impact of reduction factors on millage rates, delinquencies, collection rates, and whatnot. So coming in at just $3 million over our estimates is, first of all, we prefer to be above, hopefully, but that's very, very, very close. You can see, as you know, the uneven flow as a result of that software issue with the county. We don't anticipate that to occur next fiscal year. I've enhanced this graph in our discussion, which is the cumulative receipts in property taxes, and added all the numbers, so you can see that we ended at $406 million versus an estimate of $403 million. That's on slide 9. Slide 10 We're going to talk about the two state items together. And as you can see, as they were originally estimated based upon our foundation calculation at the beginning of the year, how they ended up was quite different line by line, but in total, up 3.8% at almost $11 million. And as you well know, 8.1 million of that is that cash flow advance from the state. I wanted to go through and explain on slide 11 of the 10.9 million where that variance came from. And again, 8.1 is primarily the cash flow advance from the state. There was, when we do our estimate like we're doing it now, we'll prepare our cash flow plan and align that with the appropriation resolution and usually with the May forecast. We may very well take our July foundation calculation and align it to that, because one of the variances we found was between the estimate of May in 14 to the foundation report that we got in July. There was about a 3.6 million variance there. So that explains another significant portion. And other than that, in dollars, we were very, very, very close. One of the things I did want to show you is, because it is a one-off, we take the advance from the state out. I redid the calculation so that had that not happened, you'd see that we'd be at 2.8 million of a variance from our original estimate. The vast majority of that being the difference between what we saw in May and what we saw in July, which we did not factor in to the month-to-month cash flow. So we would have been within less than 1% of our original estimate. So we felt very good about that. Cash flow on state foundation, as you know, enrollment numbers were delayed, so we've got that abnormal cash flow in March, which caused that 8.1 cash flow advance issue. ODE, as of Monday, I talked to some folks at a meeting, and they've informed us that they should have the enrollment numbers on time. We'll see them in October, and so if there's anything abnormal, or if we're on track or not on track with what we thought that the calculation would be and how the enrollment numbers are coming in, we should know that better in October, so much earlier. And that's the way it should be. I mean, that's the way it should have been all along. So we're getting back on track there with that information. Just a graph of the accumulation of state revenues. All other revenues came in very, very close. I give you a breakdown of that variance. And I will tell you this, that this past year, oftentimes for like this line item, we have an aggregate amount, and I simply estimated by prorating out the estimates based upon the prior year receipts. So doing a line-by-line analysis isn't very meaningful in terms of assessing whether or not the behavior of those line items changed. It's not a big factor in terms of a variance, but what I did here is highlight everything that was $1 million or more, and that's really more for me in the future, so that I know these are the trigger points, the line items that I really want to look at a little bit greater detail, so that when we get into the forecast next year, we can maybe refine that a bit better. But you have the detail here for what those major contributing factors were, how they performed relative to the estimate in prior years. Overall, again, based on an estimate of about $770 million, operating revenues came in 13 million above, and that was a 1.7 variance. And that 13 million variance is pretty much explained by 3 million in local property taxes, 3.6 million in the state revenues, 8.1 also state revenues, but it was that cash flow advance, and then some of the other revenues coming in slightly under our projection. On the non-operating side, as I've said before, advances in and advances out are generally predicted to be identical, so they have a zero cash flow impact. They don't affect our cash balance at all in budgeting and forecasting, but in actuality, they don't always equal. So I wanted to take a look at that variance. As you can see, we came in 11.7 million under the original estimate. And so I brought advances in and the advances out together on slide 19. And as you can see here, we set the estimate at 30 million for each line. and the actuals 18.3 for advances in and 12.4 for advances out. You can see both of them came in under, but not equally under. So the 5.8 million was really what they contributed to a positive cash balance for the end of the year. Again, non-operating, just cash flow issues. It can go the other way as well. But we have those temporary funding issues that will be reflected in an ending cash balance. Overall, slide 20, we're at 0.2% over. Moving on to expenditures. Slide 22 will break down for you where the dollars were expended this past year. 47% in salary and wages, 20% in benefits, 27% purchase services, supplies and materials accounted for 2%, capital outlay, very small amount, less than 1%. Debt service related to general fund operations, about 1%. Our advances and transfers, 2%, and other expenditures at about 1%. This is not a typical school pie chart because of the large expense we have for charter schools, which shows up in purchase services. You would normally expect something closer to 90% in wages and benefits and fringes, and we're at 67. But that's because it's distorted by the disproportionate amount of charter school expense compared to a lot of other schools.
Did we talk about breaking that out as a separate line item, or is that
Breaking out,
Yeah, the charter.
The charter.
Charter out of purchase services line item.
it's just
call
such
it
a
what it is.
misnomer? And
Yeah.
sure.
so material to it. I don't know, from an accounting perspective, setting up a separate line item for the next
Oh,
fiscal year.
we do track it separately. When I report at this level, I throw it as purchase services, but what I could do is I'll just segregate that out from purchase services when I regularly report, even though from an accounting perspective, it's part of it. We can do that.
That'd be great.
Right, Mike?
Yeah. If we could, I think that would be then.
Just the optics of the
Yes,
picture.
yes.
As I said at the onset, expenditures came in about 7.4 million under, or 0.9% under the estimate. As you can see, operating expenditures and non-operating expenditures performed differently. Operating expenditures came in about 10.2 above our estimate. Again, primarily driven by charter school expenses. You'll see that. And then the non-operating expenditures were the the advances out. Sorry, not transfers, but advances out that made that variance. So while in aggregate it looks very good, the advances are hard to predict, so those I don't worry that much about. But on the operating side, we did come in 10.2 over, but we know where that is. Personnel performed almost to the dollar on what I thought it would do from the very beginning. Mid-year, I made a correction, and I was actually closer with the first one than the second one, and for full disclosure. So total personnel came in within 1% of the original estimate at 5.4 under our original plan. That's just slide 25 is just a breakdown of the two to see how they've run over and under plan. And then the aggregate on slide 26 for personnel-related expenses. When I look at all non-personnel taken together, on about, I think the variance here adds up to about 15.6 million, or plus 6.9%. And again, as you can see, purchase services, line 3.03, stand out. This should help break out the charter school payments and other tuition payments for the district. So in purchase services, the variance of 18.7, essentially all of it is explained by those two lines. Several lines came in over and under that offset one another, but this really, that variance is primarily due to those coming in higher. And as you recall, that wasn't recognized by us until March. So we were in month 9 of the fiscal year. I had to figure that out real quick.
Under the property services, professional and technical, about 1.6 on 6,000,001. What was driving that?
I don't know what was driving that, because the original estimates were set up on that pro rata basis. So it could be that.
Just forecasting.
It's just a
The prior year is
forecasting area.
closer to the estimate, though.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, that proration probably threw those estimates off. But worthy of looking into. In fact, we've just had a discussion today about trying to build this from the bottom up rather than just at the acreage level and prorating down. Well, we're not quite there yet, but that would be certainly a better methodology. Again, a breakdown of supplies and materials on slide 29. They came in 2.6 under, pretty much across the board in terms of how that was prorated out based upon the prior year. In the non-operating area, you see these are the advances out as I talked about earlier, 17.5 million under what was planned. On slide 31, an update to our chart. Quite frankly, because of the magnitude of the numbers, the chart looks really good. Looks like everything's right on target, which I believe they are. But as you know, when we drive down into those details, we do have many line items that we're going to want to take a closer look at. One of my goals is to collect data that's not only descriptive, but it is predictive. And some of the data I've pulled from ODE lately has been a great description of where the dollars have gone in terms of charter school costs. Not terribly helpful on a predictive basis. So that's still going to have to be done pretty much on a trend basis in terms of where we see enrollments trending. And then also we'll actually know what the cost is being deducted for each child. But to try and get that enrollment projected over time, this is really a trend.
To that point, and I'm wondering maybe at our next meeting or how we should do this, but there has been a fair amount of news about those numbers and are they accurate and the accuracy of the numbers. Is that do you see any way at any point in time that the ODE will do some additional reconciliation to know that if that 19 million was a good number, first thing, and second, that their numbers for this school year are going to be, we're going to be more certain of them? That's just a lot of money to go out the door.
I do know that we check the numbers that are sent to us, the enrollment numbers, to make sure that the students that they're saying are ours are ours. So
Okay.
on our end, we reconcile that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not those students are actually attending on the other end and should have been charged back to us, we can't verify that. I believe State Auditor Yost has done some investigations. There's been some newspaper articles on that. But that verification is up to the State Auditor and ODE. Are they doing more to drill into that? I don't have an answer for that. I've not asked that question. Quite frankly, I've been more concerned of trying to know what our number is so that we plan for it properly.
And I'm kind of asking it to see if there are any other tools out there for us that can help get to that number, on a more certain basis.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I conceptually have not wrapped my arms around how you, from a forecasting standpoint, so that we can put it into our projections, how you can better forecast based upon a causal relationship of some variable and students enrolling in a charter school. And again, the verification side, which is also important. She's sitting right behind us, Dr. Klein, takes care of that, I believe. Am I correct? Yes. And then we rely on the auditor and ODE to make sure that they are in fact attending the other schools.
Okay.
So is the 15 million, that's the charter variance, it's about 12%. Does that correlate with a 12% reduction in enrollment, so that there's that many kids? So were we down 15?
In our
or 12?
enrollment?
Yes.
No, sir.
It doesn't.
If you can recall, I did a graph a couple of times ago, because that was a question, and it was a double-edged question. Number one, if charter enrollment's going up, is our enrollment going down? And number two, if you're forecasting increased expenditures, but our enrollment is going down in that instance, it's kind of like, what are you doing? That doesn't intuitively make sense. So I presented a graph that showed that we've
Our
leveled out.
enrollment, yeah.
I pulled a draft enrollment projection out of our master facility plan preparation. It was just draft, but I needed to use something, and those folks have flatlined enrollment out, and they go out very far. They go out more than 5 years. And it's a matter of our enrollment staying flat, but the charter enrollment going up. Is it new kids coming in? Possibly. Are they moving from other schools, perhaps the parochial system, into charter schools? It could be. I don't have a tag on where they came from, per se. That's part of the predictive dilemma that I'm in,
Right.
not being able to predict
Do they,
that.
this is a strange corollary, but, reading about the issue with the sports and how many, whether you're Division I or Division II, that there seemed to be a count of kids within the district. So you have the total N, and then you have your number, and then to be able to graph the other line, which would suggest, no, that line has gone up. Where it's sourced out of, is it new kids or not? But if that doesn't correlate, then it seems like you could almost challenge if it's off by a magnitude of some number.
Mhm.
Is there such reporting from the state or whatever for total kids in the district and where they're at that we could get our hands on, or is it active futility?
Based on when they do the ADM counts, and
Dr.
Dr. Klein was able to
Klein.
talk about the head counts when they happen and.
Do you want to
how
come
they
up,
have
Dr.
increased.
Klein? Thank you.
Please.
Yeah.
Michelle, did you hear Mr. Robinson's question?
Sure.
Could you
Yes,
do
sir.
it again?
Sure. So I was just wondering whether the state reports out total enrollment for the district, the geography, and our numbers, and whether they report out numbers for the other schools, if there's some breakdown so that we could correlate that to what we're seeing in our numbers.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I would just want to clarify.
Sure.
So if you're looking at our charter schools, is that something that you're looking at? 'Cause that
Yeah,
was a
I
question
got the
before.
impression that there was a count on the number of kids literally in the district, whether they come to Columbus City Schools or not. So it would, and again, this was just naively out of the sports discussion around.
Maybe Dr. Good knows more about that, but I do not. I know of the Columbus City School counts, I know of our parochial counts, and I know of our charter school counts.
So you have all the
Yes.
pieces,
Yes, sir.
and that's publicly available, so we
Yes.
could
It's on that chart.
correlate
Yes,
that
sir.
to the 18, or to the 12%.
Yes, sir. Along with other school kids that are homeschooled.
Mhm.
And you have to keep in mind that all students that are homeschooled are not actually reported. But yes, you get very close when you combine all of those together.
Mhm.
And I think when you talk about that, all the students in the district, that's a derived number, not a door-to-door, let's count number, if you will. So we know our enrollment, the charter schools report their enrollment, the homeschool kids get reported. The various pieces, if they're reported for funding, and we check addresses, we know we're in. So you kind of derive a number. In fact, on our foundation report, you'll see a number somewhere above 60,000, I want to say, at the top of the report. And then as you work your way down to see what we really get funded, it's in the just under 50,000. So my point is,
Yeah.
it's a derived
And I'm just
number.
wondering if that's a way to look at that, and, did the cost per pupil go up dramatically of what we're paying? Or was there a 12% shift in the number of kids in
It
charter?
will.
Sounds like we have the numbers to.
Both. Dollar amount per pupil changed in several of the categories and enrollment went up.
So we can parse that and get a better understanding of it.
Yes.
And whether it correlates or not.
I would say yes. Answer to your question, yes.
So that number is not finite. That number changes and fluctuates. It's very fluid. Students move in and out of charter schools, they move in and out of parochial, they move in and out of public.
Right, so you have to do it per month kind of thing and do a members per month and calculate it on
Yes.
that basis then.
In our forecast numbers, how are you accounting for the fluctuations? Is it just based on trends? Or is there anything else? Did you find that fluctuation on a net basis, is that where we might have lost some of the numbers? So as the students go in and out, tracking them, were we taking into account that much fluctuation so that at the end of so that in this current forecast, we would, if we account for that better, we would maybe not be as surprised as we were at the end of this fiscal year? Am I saying, if you want to help with the
If you're
interpretation?
talking about the 19 million in charter school costs, that was primarily driven by an increase in the dollars per pupil.
Okay, so that's helpful, I think, for
Not
us
by the
to
number of
understand that.
students. Not by the
is-
number
of
that
students.
12%, that was
Okay.
12% change from what we forecasted.
Yes, because for a while, they
9% of that
Yeah.
associated with the,
What was being deducted and charged to us at the beginning of the year was, I believe, just around $470.
Yep, 76.
And when the numbers came out, the second payment in March, that jumped to just under $1,000.
wow. And what drives that change?
Legislature.
Pardon me?
Isn't legislative changes recently?
That particular change was relative to economic disadvantaged children and the identification of
So
those
the
children.
mix of kids changed, is what we're saying?
The calculation changed.
Mhm.
Calculation changed.
So we knew that calculation was there, but we
Before, it was bound to, the legislature changed the laws regarding who was eligible to receive these dollars. So at one point, it was based on performance of districts and schools, and then it became if the student was economically disadvantaged. So a student could be going to any of the schools. At one point, it was, say it was a, didn't hit that academic threshold, they wouldn't have been eligible for those dollars even though they were economically disadvantaged. Now, that's not the case.
So
You can go to any school if you happen to be under a certain level, that federal poverty level, your family's income, you're now eligible for those dollars. So those were driven, I'm pretty sure, by
So it was kind of a
legislative changes.
legislative action mid-year that, so a lot of this volatility could be very well ascribed to that, and then for future forecasting, absent some event like that, then you would have a much higher level of predictability.
Dr. Good is furrowed.
Well, I'm furrowed because the district would have had the same benefit of the increased economically disadvantaged multiplier.
Yeah.
You know, moving from
Except you're capped.
476, except we're capped.
Yeah.
And the cap doesn't apply to the deduct for community schools. So the community school ADM realized that doubling effect for the economic disadvantage supplement, whereas the district's economically disadvantaged students did not. And so we've raised that issue with the State Department, and we're looking at how they determine whether they use, what's it called, the CERT list, or whether they use
Whether it's direct cert or
free and reduced lunch
free,
forms.
the federal free and reduced lunch.
Maybe we could, maybe at our next meeting, maybe we could do, would it be possible to have whoever's appropriate to do that, do a short explanation of that to us? So we
Because it
have
just
a little
feels
more
like
background?
it does lend itself to maybe more accurate forecasting in the future if there was that event and then it drives your advocacy, because that's a big change, $19 million. And if it was because of this one legislative change or the preponderance of it, then
Mhm.
You think about it differently, and then you can forecast
Well,
more
we're
effectively.
very optimistic that now we don't believe there's been a change since March like there was in March. So now we've got a better handle on it. We do trends in enrollment. We know from the result of the state budget what those deducts should be in the foundation. In fact, we're seeing them now. We've already gotten 3 payments. So we'll know those dollar amounts, and that'll help us better put together the October forecast to look forward, absent any other exogenous change like that.
I think it'll be important between now and the October forecast that, we have the committee has a good idea of how that works, and we can also communicate that to folks so that they understand that.
And really, Dr. Roush does a great job of helping to parcel that out and
Because
explain
you got whips
Yeah.
on that big time.
Yeah.
We did, but also the State Department had changed their system, which is why this didn't, we weren't made aware of this until the March payment, is my understanding. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Mhm.
And it's only a portion of this increase that's attributable to the change and the economic disadvantaged increase to
Right.
community schools. So yeah, we can present that, and then we've also been working with the legislature to seek some relief from that.
Mhm.
What's probably truly an unintended consequence for districts that are on the cap.
Right.
So,
Right.
Maybe we could say that they could say that the cap wouldn't apply to all economically disadvantaged students.
Well, the cap should apply to all parts
Yes.
of the funding. You can't do some things on the left-hand side that's calculated at, I think it's a large number difference between our cap and the calculation. I don't think it's fair to do some things over here, but we're stuck over here with limited funding, and you're taking dollars out here that you haven't capped.
Right.
They're taking dollars away from us that we've never received.
Yes,
I
go ahead.
think where this will be particularly helpful is as the staff begins to put together recommended legislative platform for the board's consideration in September, October. This has certainly been a priority for us, even without that adopted platform, but having deep understanding would help our community then understand why it is so important. It's $18 million important.
Yes.
And if you take that out, your controllable expenses, your salaries, your supplies are all under budget, which is a very positive story, but it's
Yes.
being overshadowed by this maybe legislative change that you couldn't have predicted. So that's, I think, an
And
important story.
I think for that presentation for this committee, the key is, stability, so that we know that we're able to estimate and make sure the treasurer has all the tools he needs to have that estimate be as accurate as possible. So
Mhm.
I always like the rule, no surprises, so that,
Mhm.
how do we invoke that here?
Okay?
So sorry to interrupt.
No,
That was
no problem. I'm moving as quickly as I can.
It's all good.
Hopefully, this is a quick recap of where our revenue and expenditures came in for the year on slide 32. And if I back up just a minute, you'll see that there's an 8.9 positive variance to the cash balance. I wanted the detail for the committee and the board, the contributors to that. So for the 8.9 positive variance in cash balance, $3 million in property taxes, 3.6 was attributable to that state sources, state revenue sources estimate variance. 8.1 is the advance. We had a $1.5 million negative variance in other revenue. Personnel contributed 5.4. That's both salaries, wages, and benefits combined. Contributed 5.4 to the cash balance. The non-personnel numbers, which include those advances out. I'm sorry, just the non-personnel alone was contributed. They ran over, so it took 15.6 out of the cash balance, and that's where charter schools falls in that line. So you're absolutely correct. It throws it off.
And
terribly.
again, I would almost, from a presentation, have two different line items here. Your the state charter and then the other non-personnel, because you have a very positive story on the other. It isolates it.
So,
this is a
so
good
Paul,
draft.
don't use that PowerPoint I sent you. I may have to
This is a good
change
summary,
mine.
though.
Yes, good.
I'll change a few slides. That'd be good. Just so you know, and this is something that I track, and it may be interesting to you, it may not be, but there are periodic times throughout the fiscal year that we work with our aggregate numbers in terms of revenue and expenditures. October is one when we prepare the first forecast for the year. We do a cash flow plan, which is related but can have some differences. And then we do a May update. And I just wanted to show here that from the October forecast and compared to our plan, there really were no very minimal changes. And then when we got to the May forecast, our assumptions were that revenues would be reduced by about 4.3 million, and expenditures would be pretty much on target to what we originally had. But I just like to watch what numbers we're working with over time and see where they vary, and if there's anything significant, explain that. And I really won't bore you with slide, and I don't know that this slide has a number. It does, but I don't know what it is, so we'll move on beyond that. Changes over time, and this is the actual versus estimates. As you can see that the October, this just shows October forecast versus our actual, the cash flow plan versus actual, which is what we discussed month to month. And then the May update, when we plugged in a number for fiscal 15 to see where we were. And as you can see, my original estimates for revenue were better than what I did in May. I think that's what that other slide explains to you. But expenditures came in pretty much on target to what we thought all year long. And I will note, while we talk about this report, it's 8.9 million relative to the spending plan that was added to cash balance. Relative to the 5-year forecast, it's you're going to see a 13.5 swing that we'll have an explanation for. Okay. And this rolls now, unless there's any other questions about the June report, into an update on what the final June numbers and the state budget has had on our May 5-year forecast.
Before we move into the 5-year forecast, let's just see if there are any other questions on that year-end report. So, okay.
Should we accept that?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe before we move on as well, we could is there a motion to accept this report from the committee?
Motion to accept the report.
And a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Great. All right, so we'll move to the next agenda item, which maybe we'll start with the 5-year forecast, and then the treasurer has a couple other items under there as well. You're good. Thank you, Dr. Klein.
Two main variables that are now not variables that we always discussed. One was what was going to happen to the cap and the growth of state aid year to year, and what were the final numbers and the impact on the 5-year forecast. The cap we had in the forecast at plus 5% in all the out years, fiscal 16, 17, 18, and 19. The state budget deals with only 2 years, fiscal 16 and fiscal 17, so when I went back and did the revision at 7.5%, I only did those 2 years, because we really don't know what's going to happen out in the future, and I'll address 18, 19, and 20 when we get to October. But for 16 and 17, I did 7.5 instead of 5, and then the ending cash balance in the May update was forecasted to be 125 million, and it came out at almost 139 million. Those contributions did the following. I've highlighted in the upper half of this chart is the May forecast, and I've highlighted in gold the items that were affected. As you can see, FY18 and FY19 and the state revenue is affected because you get 5% on the 2.5%. So it did roll forward into those years a bit because the base increases. Show you the updated numbers for each line and then the overall impact. Bottom line is, if you look at the very last year, fiscal 19, the forecast, had we known this then and implemented these numbers, the forecast for 19 goes from a deficit balance, ending cash balance of 164 million to still a deficit, but 97 million. We pick up on slide 40, we pick up, because of those two changes, 66.6 million in the cash balance at the end of the year, into the
Now,
forecast.
There has been, papers have said something, how, would a legislature vetoed, overruled K-6 funding formula? What would that do to it?
It would cause me to have to change my Tuesday presentation to the board.
I mean, it wouldn't, I mean, I did hear that was reported on, so I don't know how serious it is.
I'm not real sure which portions they're going to override. I'd have to think about which ones they are and whether they would be a detriment to us or not. What was done with tangible personal property didn't affect us. We're still being phased out. And to be honest, I'm not familiar with enough of the others to say what they want to veto or what they want to override.
When are they supposed to take that action?
I don't know, I mean, it's just been rumblings that that folks have been talking about, so it's always a possibility.
But they're in recess right now.
Until
So it
September.
would-
As soon as
yeah.
September.
So maybe we, as part of that other update, we could, sounds like we could maybe give a little Dr. Roush update in September.
Give it up there.
Just to see again, are we headed the right direction with this, the forecast, or is there any possibility of a revision?
And let me just briefly back up and I'll put this out there. It is an improved picture. And again, we'll do an update coming up in October. FY18 has always been the concern because that's the first time we hit a deficit cash balance. Obviously, 6 million negative is a lot more manageable than 56 million. But I just remind you that 0 is not the target. We need some operating cash at the end of the year. So it's just not a matter of making up 6 million. It's probably it's a much bigger number.
We're at least headed in the right direction.
It is headed, they are moving in the right direction. If we, you know, if, remember when I did those what ifs, like if the governor's budget proposal had gone through and he was proposing 10, we'd be done with this report by now. It'd all be positive, but we didn't get that, so. And that's it on the update. It's a very brief, quick update, just those two items.
Okay. Great.
I'll make the adjustments, try and get that charter school better highlighted so it doesn't distort the picture, and prepare that hopefully for Tuesday. If not for Tuesday, then I will certainly do that in the future.
Very good. Any additional questions for our treasurer? Hearing none, we'll move on next to the update on the cash handling procedures.
I'm going to ask Jenny Vanover to join us at the table here somewhere. She oversees the student activity and cash activities in the buildings and the cash handling in the buildings. As our response to, we reviewed the audit, and there were citations in there about the 24-hour deposit rule, as well as some internal control issues. And so we fashioned a response to that, have revised procedures, and are in the process of implementing those procedures for the beginning of this school year. What I have here for you is a flow chart of how we were doing it, and then how it's been changed.
And
Our primary,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just think it's important to point out to the committee that this has been a long time comment on the state auditor's management letter. So this is a very welcome report.
what the issue is that it's over 1,000. Over 1,000 has to be in the bank in 24 hours. The process, as you can see on the left-hand side, a staff member collects money, they count it, they complete some paper, some pay-in documentation, they get it to the building safe, It's secured, and typically it then waits for an area treasurer. We do not have an area treasurer in every building. They have routes. They go to high schools more often than middle schools, and middle schools more often than elementaries. But they aren't in a building every day. So it often sits and waits for the area treasurer to arrive. The area treasurer would then recount the money, prepare a deposit slip, do all the stuff for Dunbar, and Dunbar picks up the money and it's then deposited. It's that wait that was causing us problems, among other things. So what we did was sit down and redesign this, and in a nutshell, the person who, we're going to eliminate several steps of the area treasurers, and the person who collects the funds will do two things that they haven't done before. One is fill out a deposit ticket, and the other is write the number in a Dunbar book. So they'll collect the money, they'll count it, they'll prepare the pay-in just like they've always done. We're going to provide them tamper-proof, clear deposit bags for them to put the money in. So when they transport it from wherever they've collected it to the office, at least it's in a tamper-proof bag. It gets to the office and no one counts it again. Write the number in the book and put it in the safe. At several locations, how many that we're going to have the Dropbox safes?
At least at all the high schools with athletics, so that's around 7.
We're getting new safes so that they have a Dropbox window, if you will, so they don't have to find a principal or an assistant principal or a secretary to unlock the safe. So they collect it, fill out the paperwork, put it in the bag, get it down there, write it in the book, throw it in the safe, I'm done. So we're speeding that up. And then Dunbar comes by. A lot of folks have asked us, well, what about when there's errors in the deposits? You know, we would catch those. And so what did you do now? And they go, well, we go back and we look to see where that error might have occurred. Was it a miscount? Did you just do something wrong? Or it truly is $20 missing out of the deposit? You know, will you work that out? Well, they said, well, it's going to go to the bank. How are we going to catch that? I said, well, the bank will catch that. We'll get a report back. I think we probably get those case reports at least daily. And now the area treasurer's responsibility will be, rather than counting cash and filling out a form, it'll be looking at what went to the bank and comparing it to what's in the pay-in and going, hey, so they become more problem-solving, more analytical than simply counting cash. We don't need to count the cash so many times.
Yes.
That's what I kept saying. So we've streamlined it. It's like, 6 steps instead of 8. They're working with Dunbar on pickup schedules, looking at the safe situation, location, ease of access, all of that to speed this up. We think this addresses the issue. We've vetted this with the IA department. Kevin's in the back, so if you have any questions about internal controls, we'll drag him up here to the table.
Kevin, do you want to come on up?
Oh.
He made the trip, we'll just
Yes.
make sure he chimes in. How will you handle the Dunbar schedule? That was an issue that before was the Dunbar was only coming a couple days a week. And so even if it was ready, it wasn't picked up, so.
Can you guys, somebody down there, Mike or Jenny, address the Dunbar schedule, what we're talking about?
Well, we increased the number of stops at the high school because with all of the athletic events, they obviously have a lot more money coming in. So we've asked for an increase from 2 stops per week to 3. Hopefully that will address all of the needs and we'll have fewer special pickups needed to be scheduled. And then we also, I analyzed, we get a report every day from Dunbar that shows what schools didn't have any pickups and why, be it that they didn't have any money to pick up, that there was nobody to open the safe, that the doors were locked, that the safe or the deposit wasn't prepared, whatever the reasons were. And I analyzed the number of schools that didn't have any money for pickup, period. So Dunbar shows up and there's no money there for them to take, so they go on their way. Any school that had a high percentage of situations where Dunbar was there and there was nothing to pick up, we've gone through and we've strategically reduced some of those pickups to help offset the cost of the additional pickups at the high school. So we're trying to position the schedule and the pickups so that it's more, it's more
Aligned?
Aligned, there you go, with what the actual needs are at the individual schools. Because obviously your athletic schools, be it high schools and middle schools, are going to have more needs, whereas some of your elementary schools that have fewer fundraisers, fewer collection, wouldn't have as much of a need for the pickups. So rather than spending the money on pickups that aren't being utilized, we're going to put them where they are best suited. So-
Very good.
And just as a little side comment, because I'm very proud of our staff. Jenny's a new addition. It seems like she's been here for a long time, but how long have you been here?
Since December.
December. A new addition, and I think has done a great job in picking up what is a really difficult task, because our area treasurers are spread out across the entire district, and she doesn't necessarily see them every day. We have monthly meetings with them and whatnot. So, and handling cash and the receipts, it's just hard to get your hands around it. So she joins us, and I think it's done a great job, and this implementation of this change will be significant. And it's going to kind of be an all-hands-on-deck thing to get this done. Any change is tough to do, and not everybody will see the benefit. They won't appreciate it. They don't. It's okay. They don't care about the 24-hour deposit law. We have to, but it'll be tough. And so far, so good. It's been really great. The other, and I just thought of this as I looked down here. The four of us have known each other for a long time. Some longer than others, but you're looking at 4 duly qualified school treasurers. So we're all licensed. We all have that experience. And it's pretty cool. And there's actually one more on Scott's staff. So I have the great fortune of being able to reach out and touch 4 other qualified school treasurers on our floor. It's a nice option to have. And one here studying to be one, working on it. So part of their training. So.
Have you ever thought about adding a merchant service component to reduce the amount of cash you're keeping on hand and to increase your sales? And
I'm talking to a couple of vendors. The initial focus was on athletics, to try to offer pre-sale tickets online, that type of thing, but also the ability to take a credit card even at the door.
yeah,
So we are looking at that. We're scheduling a demo next week to
Oh,
kind of
great.
see from the second vendor that we've talked with.
Great.
We talked with
Yeah, it would be nice,
PayPam
less
that we
cash.
use for food service in
Yeah.
terms of fees and those types of things, at which point the question there becomes the link between Infinite Campus in terms of what fees are applicable to what students, and getting that populated within the PayPam, whereas this other system, once you set up an event, you can set it up however you want. So if you have a camp, you have a dance, prom, those types of things, it can be beyond the athletics. So we're looking at 2 different vendors, hoping to figure out, of course, which one's the most cost effective while still serving the needs that we want, in an effort to make it easier for parents, but also, like you say, to reduce the amount of cash actually coming in and going through everybody's hands.
Right.
So that would hopefully help, because again, even if you have an event with a lot of, like a high school
Right.
basketball game that has a high dollar amount, you might be able to get below that $1,000 threshold if half of them are online.
one of the
So
things
it
you
helps.
should also consider is, if you're talking to those vendors, see if they have gift cards of capability. So when you could buy a gift card for $20 or $50 or whatever denomination you like, but you have the ability to use it. So, I mean, you would receive the cash, but they would just have an experience where they're just swiping their card and they have an updated balance. Some merchant vendors provide that, so it's certainly something to look into.
I have
So-
a prepaid
so-
card.
Like a prepaid.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask real quick, I wanted to ask Dr., well, I'll ask Kevin, and then I'll turn to Dr. Good. I just wanted to see, Kevin, what your thoughts were, and if you had
Well,
any additional input.
I think it'll improve timeliness of deposits,
Mhm.
as well as establishing proper segregation of duties and safeguarding of cash. So I
Great.
think it's a win-win.
So the
Perfect.
the deposit slips in the tamper-proof bag that creates the ability to make that 24-hour rule by doing those 2 steps.
Mhm.
I mean, because you're, okay.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
Dr.
the
Good, I
deposit
just wanted to see, it does have, so staff is involved with this process. Any comments or thoughts that you had?
I'm excited I'll be able to sleep the night after the auditor does their financial report to us, because this has been one that It has plagued the district for a number of years. So this has been a great team to take it on and figure out a solution.
Well, I appreciate it. It's going to take a village to make this happen, but appreciate everyone working together.
And yes,
to
we
do
have
that.
worked with staff and associations on this as well.
Good stuff.
Good. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Welcome aboard. And Kevin, thank you for linking arms to get this done. So thank you. Any additional questions before everybody leaves? Very good, very good.
Thank you. The only other, if you want to just mention, if you
Yeah.
notice on the agenda, I took the liberty to add a section at the bottom for future items, discussion items. So if you say, why don't we talk about this, we add them on. And I know open checkbook one outstanding. Sounds to me like a charter school enrollment cost discussion is probably necessary to be added to the list as well. So we'll do that. I felt that was a good way to track it.
And
if
then
that's
I think
okay.
the third thing would be an update on, any changes in the state budget. Possibly that might change what we know of as a state budget right now. Then did you, we'll move to Mr. Gooding here in a second.
I'm good. We're all set.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. So we'll turn next to Treasurer Gooding to talk about a budget transfer issue.
And have Dr. Klein come up and join us. So I'm gonna, from the finance side, I'm gonna try to talk a little bit about program, but I know I won't do it quite as well as what Michelle can do. This is our first.
No need to get too far in the weeds.
We won't get too far in the weeds, but this is our first dealing with the new format of our appropriations resolution, and in that we have a situation here, and at a very high level, it's a changing of responsibility from one department to another. The request is $495,000, which exceeds that $50,000 mark we put in there. And as we talk through this, we knew this was coming, but we also knew this would be a fantastic example for us to walk through with the committee, because 38 hours of public presentation on the budget, we'll have this done in less than 5. Because we don't want to confuse things when we spent so much time publicly presenting these budgets and then come in at the last minute and say, well, wait a minute, we have a shifting of responsibility for the Infinite Campus, the Student Information System program, that we're essentially moving from the Information Technology Department to the Accountability Department. There's rationale for it. We just didn't want to confuse that issue at the time, so we knew what we would do is we'd hold on to that, come before you this afternoon, present this change, and then what we'll do is make a change in the appropriation resolution on Tuesday's meeting, if the committee's comfortable with that, moving that $495,000 from operating unit 944 to operating unit 946. And so with that, kind of turn it over to Dr. Klein to talk through that changing in responsibility piece.
Thank you. Sharon Board Member Hudson, members of the Finance and Appropriations Committee. We ask for your consideration of the budget transfer for the Infinite Campus line items due to a realignment of our student information system into the academic side of the house. Our student information system contains our course deck, our state reporting elements, assessments, attendance, and grading for all students in our school system. We thank you for your consideration.
So it's moving right now from an IT line to academic service line. So other than that move, is there going to be any change in does that increase or decrease the net amount of funds that'll come
No.
over? Okay, and no other change other than it's an administrative responsibility?
No behavioral change.
Any committee members have any questions? So, thank you, Dr. Klein. I think, I don't know that the committee needs to approve this. I think just to indicate that it was vetted, we'll indicate to the board it was vetted with the committee, and they had no additional comments. President Baker, do you think that's sufficient for the board?
I think that it should be, Madam Chair, if you want to take a vote to approve it or recommend it. I think that would be in order as well.
Okay.
Second to recommend.
Yes.
Was it the 50,000 is the limit of where, okay, it comes.
It was
okay, thank you.
50,000 or 20%.
So if
Okay.
it goes from one of the lines to another, so this is moving from one
Yeah.
completely
I got it.
separate division to another.
We're crossing OPUs, operational units, which is our budgetary control unit, which is on the non-personnel side. That's what was detailed.
So is there a motion for approval of the transaction as described by the budget director and Dr. Klein?
So moved.
Okay, and Mr. Robinson moves, and a second?
I will second it.
Okay, very good. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks. So with that, we don't have other business on here, but is there anything else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, then is there a motion to adjourn?
Wow.
A second? All right. Yes, very efficient. I will say, so in September, we'll be presenting some information about the analysis, the status of the capital analysis. So that'll be coming up in September. Then October will be, of course, the forecast again. So, and then the other items we talked about today. So, thank you very much. Hope everybody
Thank you.
enjoys the tail end of the summer.
A